Christopher Hope, thank you so much for your contributions and to the rest of my guests and panel on what has been an extraordinary couple of hours. Boris Johnson has resigned as an MP. Plenty more coverage continuing here on BBC News and, of course, on the website and on the app. For the moment, though, I'm Lewis Vaughan-Jones. This is BBC News.
I'm Sumi Somaskanda in Washington, and this is BBC World News America. Donald Trump faces 37 charges related to documents he stored at his Mar-a-Lago home. The details are dramatic. The consequences are as yet unknown. New evidence emerges over what may have led to a dam bursting in Ukraine. We'll have the latest from our correspondent on the ground. Plus, we meet the man with the largest bagpipe collection in the world. And more importantly, we hear what his neighbors think about it. Welcome to World News America on PBS and around the globe. We start with something that has never happened in American politics. This afternoon in Washington, D.C., authorities unsealed a federal indictment against a former U.S. president. Donald Trump is facing 37 criminal counts over retaining national defense information, nuclear secrets, and obstruction of justice. Now, we'll discuss the charges in a moment, but this indictment adds to the legal difficulties the former president is facing. Here's a reminder: a separate trial that is due in New York, in which he is accused of paying hush money to the former porn star Stormy Daniels and falsifying business records. And he is also under investigation for his role in the attack on the U.S. Capitol by his supporters in 2021, when he claimed he'd won re-election. Also, Mr. Trump may have to answer claims that he tried to overturn the election result in the state of Georgia in his attempt to remain in power. For more, here's our North America editor, Sarah Smith.
Mar-a-Lago, Donald Trump's private club and residence in Florida, where he is alleged to have kept classified and top-secret documents which could endanger the national security of the United States. The indictment against Mr. Trump includes photographs of sensitive material being stored on stage in a ballroom where public events were held. Other boxes were kept in a bathroom. You can see them stacked up by the shower. The documents were all removed from the White House when Donald Trump left office, and they included secrets about America's nuclear weapons, about the military capabilities of the US as well as other countries, and of plans about how to retaliate in the face of a foreign attack. It was in Mar-a-Lago Donald Trump announced he's running for president again. It's also where he's accused of trying to obstruct justice. Told to search for documents that had to be returned, he suggested to his lawyers, "Wouldn't it be better if we told them we don't have anything here? And, well, look, isn't it better if there are no documents?" An independent special counsel is running this highly sensitive case.
We have one set of laws in this country, and they apply to everyone. Applying those laws, collecting facts, that's what determines the outcome of an investigation. Nothing more and nothing less.
He's emphasising the national security risk. Donald Trump used to agree.
In my administration, I'm going to enforce all laws concerning the protection of classified information. No one will be above the law.
The FBI found hundreds of classified papers in Mar-a-Lago, and prosecutors say on 2 occasions Donald Trump showed secret material to outsiders, including military plans, even saying he shouldn't be sharing it. President Biden's trying to keep out of it, saying he has nothing to do with this investigation.
President Biden, have you spoken to Attorney General Merrick Garland yet?
I have not spoken to him at all. I'm not going to speak to him, and there's no comment on what happened.
So, like a pack of rabid wolves, they attack.
Donald Trump already has campaign ads claiming he's a political target. He thinks this will be a vote winner for him. After appearing in court in New York in April, charged with making illegal hush money payments, he raised $12 million and his poll ratings increased. Pictures from Donald Trump's Bedminster Golf Resort in New Jersey today appear to show him playing around. He's said to be in a defiant mood, planning to go ahead with campaign appearances tomorrow, which aides say are likely to be spicy. Sarah Smith, BBC News, Washington.
Our North America correspondent Nomia Iqbal spoke to residents in Miami, Florida, to see what they think of Trump's indictment. Nomia, you are there in Miami where Donald Trump is to be arraigned on Tuesday. You've been speaking to people. How have they been reacting to this indictment?
Well, Sumi, prosecutors want Donald Trump to face a jury here in Florida where they say the alleged crimes took place about 2 hours away in Mar-a-Lago, his residency. Remember, Florida is a Republican state, a Republican-leaning state. It voted twice for Donald Trump in 2016 and in 2020. Earlier, I went to a country club and spoke to some voters to get their reaction on the indictment.
I think it's very terrible, and it's a witch hunt against that man. It's been going on for 6 years.
He's been accused of keeping nuclear secrets. That's a massive breach of security. It could be used by an enemy. Does that not worry you?
That's a little worrisome, yes.
That's something that he has been accused of.
That's true, but I don't know if that's what they found there.
Well, it wasn't a surprise, but I mean, the law should apply to everybody. So if a grand jury found enough evidence, then yeah, he should be indicted. If it was a regular person, right, they would have been indicted probably a long time ago.
Previous Democrat presidential candidates have done far worse, I think, that has been reported than Donald Trump did. And they have basically gotten off scot-free. So all I'm saying is if he's guilty, he's guilty. But there are other guilty people out there, and if you're going to go after one, right, you have to punish the people who have done the injustices.
Nomia, really interesting insights that you got there. Take us ahead to Tuesday. What are we going to see on Tuesday in Miami?
I think we can expect it to be a bit of a media circus like we saw in New York when he was indicted. Donald Trump is expected to appear at the courthouse behind me. We don't know if he will be fingerprinted or if there'll be a mugshot. There wasn't in New York. There might be negotiations around that. He will enter the courtroom, face a judge who will lay out the charges to him, and he will then enter a plea. And we know the special prosecutor Jack Smith said he then hopes that a trial will happen quickly after that. So yes, on Tuesday, we are gearing up for a historic day where, once again, Donald Trump changes the political landscape in America.
Nomia Iqbal for us in Miami. As always, great to talk to you. That's the view there from Miami, and we have the BBC's Anthony Zerker with us here in the studio. Hi, Anthony. We just got the reaction there in Miami. I want to talk more about this indictment that was unsealed today, Friday. And what is in it. What stood out to you as the most important points here?
Well, I think very early on in the indictment, it spells out what these classified documents that Donald Trump had were. And that's information about the United States' nuclear arsenal, vulnerabilities that the United States and its allies may have had, and details over retaliatory attacks the United States could launch against countries that attack us. It said that these were sensitive documents, sensitive material that could pose a threat to American national security if they were revealed. It also had a couple of instances where Donald Trump seemed very casual about sharing these sorts of documents with people who he met at his estates. In Bedminster, there was a conversation he had with a whole group of people where he presented a document that apparently had a plan for the United States to attack a third country, which is reportedly Iran. And there's a recording of that as well. And then he also shared in another instance a map of another country saying that a military operation there was going badly. So I think those were tangible evidence that Donald Trump not only had these documents, but that he was willing to pull them out in casual conversation to make a point.
Those are the indictments, or that's the indictment rather, the counts that were laid out. We've learned also more about the judge that will oversee this case. Tell us why that is significant.
Eileen Cannon, who was appointed by Donald Trump when he was president, actually was involved earlier on in this case. She reviewed the search of Mar-a-Lago and appointed a special master, someone independent, to review all of the documents that had been obtained during this FBI search before handing him over to the Justice Department. She said it was necessary to protect presidential privilege, executive privilege. That decision ended up getting pushed aside by an appellate court, but I think the perception is that she may be more friendly to the defense in this case, and that this may mean that this case could drag on longer because she's going to require Jack Smith and all of the prosecutors to jump through more hoops. And
at the same time, we've seen this flurry of activity around the former president's legal team as well. Tell us about that.
Yeah, two of Donald Trump's lawyers, James Trusty and John Rowley, announced today that they were resigning, quitting the legal defense team. They weren't critical of Donald Trump. They said it was an honor to work for him. But these were two of the lawyers who were in meetings with prosecutors as earlier this week. Donald Trump said that his defense is going to be handled by Todd Blanche, who is also handling Donald Trump's defense in that New York case, as well as another firm that he has yet to name. But obviously, these are very serious charges, probably more serious than those New York ones as far as the amount of prison time he could be facing, the amount of fines he could be facing. These are federal charges. So I think he needs to assemble a legal team that is familiar with national security law and classified information law.
All right, very interesting. Our correspondent Anthony Zerker with us here. Thank you so much, Anthony.
My pleasure.
From the biggest political story here in the U.S., we switch to the United Kingdom, where Britain's former Prime Minister Boris Johnson has announced he is resigning as an MP with immediate effect. In a lengthy statement, Mr. Johnson claimed he'd been driven out by a committee investigating whether he deliberately misled Parliament. He said he'd received a report by the inquiry, which he dismissed as a biased kangaroo court. The panel has been examining whether Mr. Johnson knowingly lied about parties at Downing Street that broke COVID rules. In March, the former Prime Minister admitted misleading Parliament, but denied doing it on purpose. Here's our political reporter, Ben Wright, laying out the news when it first broke.
This is extraordinary. This was unexpected. We did not think this was about to happen. Boris Johnson has triggered an immediate by-election. He's standing down. He's throwing in the towel. He's leaving Parliament. A letter that his office has just released, that you've read a big chunk of, explains why. I mean, he is furious. We know that he received a letter from the Privileges Committee that had been investigating whether or not he deliberately lied to Parliament. He received their initial findings early this week. He then had a couple of weeks to respond, and we didn't expect to hear anything really more about the Privileges Committee until the end of June. But he has jumped the gun. He's preempted it. He has lashed out at the work of that committee, describing it as a kangaroo court, describing what's happened to him as a political hit job. He's lacerating about the chair of that committee, Harriet Harman, who I haven't heard from yet, but I've just tried to make contact with her. But the headline is that he's had enough. He's off.
Ben Wright reporting there. Now, Pakistan's economy is on the brink of collapse. It has struggled for months to sign a deal with the International Monetary Fund. Inflation is high and its foreign reserves are running low. Today, the government announced its budget for the next year. Our Pakistan correspondent Caroline Davies has more.
Pakistan's economy is in trouble. The cost of everything is going up, but particularly food. It's estimated to be over 40%, which is affecting everyone in the country.
Every customer here complains about inflation. They ask us to reduce the price. We don't have the control over pricing and cannot make adjustment due to inflation.
The big problem for the government is that while people are struggling, it doesn't have very much room in its budget to maneuver. It just doesn't have the money. Pakistan is already finding it difficult to be able to pay for the goods that it needs to import. It's been trying to do a deal with the International Monetary Fund, but in order to do that, it needs to look financially responsible. On the other hand, there's an election this year, and with people struggling so much, the government are under pressure to do something that's going to be popular with voters.
Caroline Davies there in Pakistan. Hundreds of children caught up in the war in Sudan have been rescued in a daring and dangerous evacuation as fighting in the country continues. Around 300 children and babies were successfully taken from the Maigoma orphanage in the capital Khartoum to Wad Madani in the south of Sudan. Barbara Plett-Usher reports.
A dangerous journey carrying precious cargo. Nearly 300 children evacuated from an orphanage in the war zone. More than half of them under the age of 2. Getting them out of Khartoum was complicated because the fighting is still going on. But the convoy was given safe passage through multiple checkpoints.
It was really heartbreaking to see all these children, some of them having mental health conditions, some other health conditions, to be there in the midst really of conflict.
In Khartoum, the babies were forced to leave their beds. They had to be moved because the orphanage was caught in crossfire. They were short of food. It was very hot. Most of the staff couldn't make it to work. 67 children died here after the conflict began. Separately, clearly marked buses had already evacuated dozens of older orphans to a different location. Organized by local activists, they found refuge in the yard of a government building. Only enough food for one day's meals at a time. They're appealing for support.
One of the neighbors asked me what we need. She said she did not have anything to offer, but she will help.
In the midst of this horrible war, the story of the babies is a glimmer of hope.
How did you feel when you heard that the convoy had arrived safely?
I can't describe it. For the whole team, it was really incredibly a huge relief, a huge relief. It brought a bright ray of light to all of us.
They're looking for foster homes in safer parts of the country. But 13 million children in Sudan still need life-saving support and a lasting ceasefire in order to get it. Barbara Platt-Usher, BBC News, Nairobi.
Let's get a quick look at some other headlines now. President Macron of France visited the families of 4 children attacked by a knife-wielding man in the French town of Annecy. On a visit to where the victims are in the hospital, he also met a bystander who tried to chase off the assailant. The police have arrested a Syrian man suspected of carrying out the crime. And Australian airline Qantas has relaxed its gender-based uniform rules, allowing male employees to wear makeup and have long hair. Its new style guide means female employees will no longer have to wear makeup and heels while on duty. Along with being able to wear flat shoes, both women and men will be allowed to wear the same sorts of jewelry. 4 days after a dam was destroyed in southeastern Ukraine, at least a dozen people are known to have died and hundreds of people are trapped in their homes have posted pleas for help on social media, asking to be rescued from the rising water. Our Ukraine correspondent James Waterhouse is in the city of Kherson, in the affected region.
A journey to safety and away from occupation. It's a voyage Marina and Valentina never thought they'd have to make.
I feel a sense of joy that we're alive, that we were brought here.
It has been very difficult. There was no power, no reception. It was as if we were on an uninhabited island. Our cats drowned, our dogs drowned, our chickens drowned.
Their friend Victor made the same journey, days after his wife was killed by shelling. He had to collect her death certificate from the officials Moscow installed.
It's good they rescued us, but I don't care about anything anymore. I don't want to go on living. Where do I go from here? I hope to give her a gravestone a year after her death. I buried her next to my mother, and I told her to wait for me.
In online posts, hundreds of people have begged to be rescued from the eastern bank. We try several numbers, with no luck.
Means I found out.
Some of the trapped say they're running low on water and food. There's a wariness for those who make it out. Despite warnings from the military to stay away, there are still volunteers here carrying out the endless rescue effort. 3 days on, the water is browner, but people are still being found. But the army are less keen. Usual to and fro of artillery has got louder. It's got closer. We meet international medics here with the Army's blessing. Dominic, from the UK, explained the ongoing risks.
It's the dehydration aspect, it's the infection risk, because with that you've got rising water, but then you've also got massive obstacles underneath the water.
Kyiv has criticised the speed of international help since the Kakhovka Dam was destroyed. It is arriving. The need for it isn't going anywhere. James Waterhouse, BBC News, Kherson.
As Russia continues its war in Ukraine, President Putin is waging another war at home on dissent. Since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, thousands of Russians have been prosecuted under new laws designed to stifle criticism of the country's war effort. This week, one of Russia's most prominent human rights campaigners has gone on trial for his stance on the war. Oleg Orlov, who is 70, faces up to 3 years in jail for allegedly discrediting the Russian army. The BBC's Russia editor Steve Rosenberg attended the trial in Moscow.
Arriving for his trial, one of Russia's most respected human rights campaigners. Oleg Orlov stands accused of repeatedly discrediting the Russian army through his public criticism of the war in Ukraine. He faces up to 3 years in prison. Ahead of the trial, he told me how concerned he is by the wave of repression sweeping Russia.
By the level of cruelty, by the length of prison terms being handed out, this is reminiscent of Stalin's time. Civil society has been pushed underground, partially. What I fear is that it may now be completely destroyed.
More examples. Theatre director Zhenya Berkovich wrote anti-war poems. She's been charged with justifying terrorism in one of her plays. That could mean 7 years in prison. And for anti-war online posts, Olga Smirnova is accused of spreading fake news about the Russian army. She faces a decade in jail.
On paper, the Russian constitution guarantees freedom of conscience and freedom of speech. In reality, Russians who publicly criticize those in power are taking a considerable risk. The authorities here have built up quite a hefty toolbox of repressive laws, which are used to punish those who criticize the government and the war in Ukraine.
But they are not forgotten. Once a month, Muscovites come here to write letters and postcards to political prisoners. The event is organised by one of Russia's last remaining liberal parties. In a country where collective protest is restricted, there's still pen and paper to show solidarity and support. Just a few words, but they can mean so much to those behind bars.
You might start thinking that you are alone, you might fall into depression, and when they read our cards, our letters, I hope that makes them feel better.
The music matches the mood, the anxiety as repression grows. But writing these is one way of showing they won't be silenced. Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, Moscow.
Okay, we have one more item for you. Bagpipes. They're not for everyone. They can bring a tear to the eye at funerals or a ringing in the ears elsewhere. We'd like to introduce you to the man who holds the record for having the largest collection of bagpipes in the world. His name is Daniel Fleming, and he hopes to beat his own record by doubling his collection. Crispin Rolfe has his story.
My first set of bagpipes were bought by my late father, and it's actually this set here.
The first of many. 10 years ago, Daniel Fleming created a record for the most amount of bagpipes anyone could own, of 105. Now this year he hopes to double that, having increased his collection to 210. Bad news for the neighbours.
I have got wonderful neighbours, and it's wonderful that they applaud me at 3 o'clock in the morning when I'm finishing playing. I'm not sure what they're shouting. I think it's probably more. I hope it's more.
And of course there's Danny's long-suffering wife Jane.
There you go. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Love you.
Thanks.
He didn't have that many when I first met him. He does do lots of practicing, and it's not too bad, but you can't really hear it. If it's at the front of the house, I'm in the back of the house with the radio on.
I don't know whether someone has 105 or indeed 106 sets, hence why I've still kept collecting. So I'm sincerely hope that someone hasn't got more than 210. I very much doubt it.
And if they do, who'd want to be their neighbours? For now though, Danny's got to wait for the Guinness Book of Records to verify his claim, but the chances are he's going to be a world record breaker again. Crispin Rolfe, BBC Look North in Cleethorpes.
Congratulations to Daniel there. Okay, before we go, we'd like to remind you of our top story this hour, the 37 charges leveled against Donald Trump. They relate to the alleged retention of national defense information and nuclear secrets. According to the unsealed indictment, classified files were stored in a shower, a bathroom, and Mr. Trump's bedroom at his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida. A close Trump aide has also been charged over the handling of the files. The former president is leading the polls for the Republican nomination for president. Mr. Trump has insisted he is innocent. I'm Sumi Somaskanda. Thank you for watching World News America.
Hello there. High pressure continues to dominate the weather picture in Scandinavia.